Servus and welcome to another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 32. For those of you listening, welcome back. For those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, you'll see I'm back this week. Last week we covered my story. Thanks again to Josh Juris there for being the host last week, and now I'm back on the normal side of the mic here. But this week it's honestly a common theme. It seems to be I only get Burlington guys on or Union Dutchmen. So another guy that was part of that great Union Dutchman teams. Coincidentally, we ended up playing together later down the road in pro there, which was nice, living together in Morzine. But this guy, as I said, was a college route guy, played pro, and now has transitioned into coaching himself in the BCHL. Happy to have him on my podcast. Welcome, Kyle Bodie.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's I've been following along, and like you said, yeah, pretty common theme with either guys from your hometown or guys who went to Union. So it's been good.
Yeah, I got to start expanding my guess here because it's
Yeah.
everyone's gonna think that I'm plugging Union or
Yeah, they probably appreciate it.
yeah, maybe. I mean, to be fair, before we start, I don't know how you feel about that name change. I know it got a lot of heat from a lot of some alumni.
Yeah, not sure who they had in creative there, but um, not sure where to go with that. I see the team kept the same logo on their jerseys, so I think that probably speaks to what the hockey team thought of it.
I actually thought man, I thought that the name the Dutchman was cool. Like it's something different. Like, like other people, it's like, the Tigers or like, something like that. But like the Dutchman was like it really like solidified like we are Union Dutchmen. So
Yeah, I think I'd probably have to dig pretty deep to find other schools or other teams that use that nickname. But like you said, like so many schools down there have the same name as like a school out west or a school in the southeast or whatever it is. But I thought it was pretty unique. And then obviously for the female sports, they went with Dutch women, and but I guess it crossed the line somewhere. I don't know.
yeah, I guess that's a topic for another day. But
Yeah.
again, appreciate you having you here and taking some time out of your Sunday. Always on this podcast, we go back to the beginning at the start. So you were born in, I believe, East St. Paul, Manitoba, not Minnesota. And is that where you kind of first grew up and learned to play hockey?
Yeah. We lived in the same house my entire life, and grew up playing, yeah, for East St. Paul Aces, and kind of your stereotypical Canadian kid. Dad built the backyard rink. We actually lived on a lake, so to start we had that, and then my dad was like, "Ah, you know what? It's a little too far because we had to like walk down a hill and whatnot to get to it." And then he made one right off our deck, and that's kind of where myself, my brother, and neighborhood kids grew up playing. That with a combination of the outdoor rinks in East St. Paul. So pretty stereotypical Canadian start and introduction to the game for sure.
And what for yourself, like, would you say, as you said, like stereotypical Canadians, like we grow up with the sport, but like what like drew you to it? Like, was your dad, taking you to games at a young age? Were you watching, Hockey Night in Canada or something on the TV? Like, what like drew you initially to the sport of hockey?
Um, like we definitely had Hockey Night in Canada on every Saturday. Like that was on for sure. Um, my parents had season tickets to the original Jets, so my brother and I would go, and I can remember playing like mini sticks in intermission and whatnot, kind of in the concourse. And um, I was fortunate enough that at a young age I was like a pretty good skater, so I had a lot of fun even if I didn't have like a stick in my hands. And then I think it was just like a combination of all those things of just like constantly being exposed to different aspects of hockey that I think is probably what got me like really wanting to be on the ice all the time. And yeah, my dad and mom would do anything for us. If we wanted to go to the rink, they'd drive us there when we didn't have that backyard one. And if we did, they would make sure it was cleared off so we could go out and spend all day out there. So pretty fortunate that way. Yeah.
Amazing the sacrifices parents make at such a young age. And, it's, for all they know, you could in 5 years give up the sport, but they're still getting up early, whether it's flooding the rink, clearing it off, countless sacrifices taking you guys to practice. But it's Canadian heritage, I'd say, also now in a lot of other countries, parents are doing the same. But was your brother as well? You mentioned your brother there, so he's still playing right now in Ingolstadt in Germany. I see him a lot. We haven't faced off against them yet, but I'm sure we do in the next couple weeks. Was he kind of drawn immediately just, to the sport like yourself, and then him seeing you playing it like when you guys were younger, he wanted to kind of be like his bigger brother?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was definitely part of it. And another thing with him too is, yeah, there's like a 2 year gap between us, but he was always able to kind of keep up and hold his own. So it wasn't like he was getting bored out there or, feeling like he was getting bullied around or anything like that. And we had a lot of friends that were a combination of the ages, so we'd always be able to mix like the ages that were playing. So, um, and then having both of us, like I would feed off him, he would feed off me type thing. We always had someone to play with or against, depending on the mood, I guess. But yeah, it was one of those things where I think for him being the younger one, he just came by it naturally, seeing it all the time. So I think that probably played a part in it for sure.
I'll have to, if I ever get him on, I'll have to ask him. But did the big brother ever throw him a net, just because he was the younger guy and you needed someone to shoot at?
Yeah, we both took our turns in net. It's funny you say that. Our dad was a goalie growing up, and he was from the era of no mask and whatnot, and um, he was pretty set against us not being goalies. So whenever it came to be our turn for like in minor hockey, it's like, okay, it's your turn in net this weekend or whatever. He would come out that week in practice and just torch us. Like he would just torch us to the point where yeah, we wanted nothing to do with it. But yeah, definitely on the outdoor rink or street hockey, there were some times where I would say, okay, yeah, you got to get in the net here because it's getting a little boring shooting on the empty net. But it was good, all good.
Brotherly love.
Yeah.
Um, so what was the like your minor hockey path? I believe you played a lot for the Winnipeg Thrashers there. So what was the structure out there in terms of minor hockey, like similar to kind of Ontario, where you had, in Winnipeg, obviously a bigger city, you had like the triple A, double A, single A for kind of like each age group, or how was it structured back when you were playing?
Yeah. So back when I was playing, up until you were 11, you played in your own association. So for us, like that was East St. Paul. So for those ages, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're structured into A1, A2, A3. But you don't really play against the whole city. You kind of only play against the other associations that are close to you. And then at 11, you can move to double A, and that's when the associations start kind of amalgamating. And so, like, let's say like 4 or 5 will become one team, and then 4 or 5 from the south end become another team from the west end, etc. And then at that's for your 11 and 12-year-old, and then at 13 is when AAA starts. And so I kind of took the path of I played for East St. Paul, and then when I was 10, I actually went up an age group and played double A for River East. Played those, and then went to Sharks, and then from Sharks, Winnipeg Sharks, you play your Pee-wee Bantam with that, and then you get into the Thrashers. And when you get into the Thrashers, that's what they would consider, I guess, like major midget now, where you travel around the entire province and every zone within the province has a team and whatnot. So that was kind of the path that I took, and a path that like a lot of the prairie guys seem to take, whether it's in Manitoba or Sask. It's for whatever reason, midget hockey is pretty big out there, and you kind of stick with that unless you have an opportunity to kind of go to that next level. But that's how I went.
And I like just like by looking at your career there, like one point that I think is cool to bring up is, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going off elite prospects, at least for this part, but I believe you end up playing like 2 years of the midget level. If I don't know if it was structured the same, like in Ontario, it was, you play 1 year midget if you don't play it higher, and then you have one more year of midget, and then after that it's like you got to go to junior. So basically you're starting junior at 18 if you're playing the 2 years of midget. And I believe that was for yourself. Like, what was the reason for staying that second year? I would say, like, was it you wanted to stay because maybe you had more ice time there, more chance to develop, or was there another reason, or maybe you just hadn't thought about junior yet?
Um, so when I was playing, it was actually structured that your midget, you could play major midget at 15, 16, 17. And my 15-year-old year, I actually broke my wrist like a day before tryouts. So I actually ended up playing minor midget that year, which was fine. It was a lot of the same guys that I played with that were my age. It would be like Elite 15, I think they call it, at least out here in BC, they call it now. Um, but around that time was when I kind of started getting exposed to the college game and that route. And it was one of those things where I felt that if I was going to go play junior at 17, I didn't necessarily want it to be in the MJ, because at that time, and it still is that rule, if you wanted to play junior A and you hadn't graduated yet, you got to play in your home province. And um, so that was definitely a big thing. I had an opportunity. I could have played in the MJ at 17 if I wanted, but kind of to touch on what you said, I knew I would get more ice. Um, I knew our team was going to be pretty good, so we were probably going to get some good exposure. We had some guys who were on dub radars and other junior leagues and whatnot. So that's definitely one thing that I don't even think I really contemplated too hard leaving to go play at 17, even though the opportunity was there. It was just kind of like I wanted to stay there with the goal of getting out of Manitoba to play junior, whether it be the goal was to go west. So the ultimate goal was the BCHL. But I think at that age and that time, I was definitely open to Alberta and Sask as well.
I didn't know they had that rule. Like, is that, would you, I mean, you could be guessing, or maybe like, do they just try to have that rule because they want guys to at least, like, if they're going to make that jump to junior, they'll at least play like 1 year in their home province of junior to just to kind of like strengthen it? Or like, do they find a lot of guys leave? Like,
I think it's probably to keep as best they can guys in their home branch, or to encourage the higher end guys to go major junior. Because for the WHL, like where I was, if you're 16 or 17 and you're a stud, you can go play for whatever team has your rights. It doesn't matter. You can cross the province borders. Um, I don't know exactly why that rule's in place for like tier two junior and lower, because the high school kids can leave and go play in the USHL, for example, which a lot of young Canadian kids do if they don't want to play in their province. So, um, yeah, I don't know why they've kept that rule, because I think it might be a little dated.
it's just interesting to hear. The MJHL, I think the only team I know in there is the Winkler Flyers.
Yeah.
I went to an all-star game there one time, and
Oh yeah.
what a town that was.
Yeah.
But another thing I wanted to talk about. So when you were at that age, I believe the WHL draft is 1 year earlier than it is in Ontario.
Yeah.
I don't believe you got drafted, but I'm still wondering, at that point when you're playing these midget years and obviously you're doing well, like you had very good numbers, like and you said before you had kind of your avenue, or like your thought process been opened up to the NCAA route before going to the BCHL. Had you ever thought about the major junior side of it, or you were just focused on, strictly, I want to get out of here, go to the BCHL if I can, and then see what comes next?
I don't know if it was ever anything that I like seriously considered going that route. I'd always been one of the better players from my age group, but by no means was I the top. There were a lot of guys from Manitoba and from Sask who you play against growing up that you kind of saw what trajectory they were on. And, um, I was a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of growing and in terms of some strength and whatnot. And Having been exposed to the potential of going the NCAA route, and then having the opportunity to see some games at like UND, like North Dakota, at younger ages, and kind of getting a taste of that atmosphere and whatnot, mixed with both my parents were teachers, and it kind of just was like, okay, you know what? If I turn my focus to go that way, not only is the education piece added, but you know, I think how I was looking at it then was it gives me that many more years to develop and potentially keep playing. Where it was like if I go the major junior route and for whatever reason, I age out, I might not have any options after 20 years old. So um, I think I did go to a couple camps. I went to Seattle's camp. And then I went to Brandon's camp my 17-year-old year and had a really good camp. And they wanted me to play some exhibition games. And um, honestly, just by chance, we happen to know the rule that if you play exhibition games, you can potentially burn your eligibility. So I chose not to, and don't have any regrets making that decision. But sometimes you want to say, if you would have played that, like, would I have went that route? So things worked out in the end, but I think my game and the way that I was developing and growing and maturing was tailored more to trying to go the NCAA route from a younger age than it was trying to pursue major junior.
I do think that like that camp rule, I think that's so like old school. Like that needs to change because like there's kids, like especially us growing up, like I'm your brother's age, so we're 2 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was really exposed at a young age to the OHL. So like it was everything I knew. And I feel like if you play in like exhibition games in like one or two, like that shouldn't burn your eligibility. Like that's like to
Yeah,
me, it's like not even a real game. So like I think that rule needs to change. But it was good to hear that you kind of like you kind of experienced that. Like you went to those camps and like you didn't play games, but you still got your experience, going to camp, and then you just kind of knew that yeah, like my route could more so be on the school side. So
yeah, yeah. It was definitely good to get exposed. Like I remember um, going to those camps, and like there were some big boys, and this would have been right around the time of like the new rules, if you want to call them. They're not the new rules now, but where the clutching and grabbing went away and all that. So like there were some guys who definitely were from that era, and kind of your stereotypical story of like the Western League. Like on the back end, it's like big 6'3", 6'4", and I'm coming in at like 16 years old, and I'm 5'10", like a buck 40, if that. So it was definitely good to get my eyes open in that aspect, and to see that I was able to actually compete and hold my own um, was obviously a confidence builder as well. So mm-hmm.
and then after your last year of midget there, you end up so I'm assuming you finished school, high school, and then you end up making that jump to the BCHL in Powell River. How did that decision come about or chance? Like, obviously it's still kind of the same thing, like at a young age, or not a young age, but like at 18, you're still having to go to these camps and like prove yourself, like it's still tier two junior. Like, did you know right away you were going to go to Powell River? Did you go to other camps as well?
Well, so in the MJ, Portage had my rights, and they're a pretty good team if you're going to play in the MJ. They are consistently near the top and whatnot. And I just, at that time, like advisors weren't a thing, and it was kind of family decisions, right? And I was really good friends, still am good friends with like the Zajac family. So the fact that Travis Zajac, who's a few years older than me, went the route of going out west, and then seeing the next brother go out west, and then obviously Kelly, like I knew he was going to be going that way, and then growing up against like Jonathan Taves and him from an early age deciding to go to the school route. Um, it kind of, as the season went on, that 17-year-old year went on, I remember having discussions with my parents and just kind of saying like, I think if I want to be serious to try and get a scholarship, I got to get out of the province. And like I said earlier, I was pretty open to just kind of making my way west, however that be. So I was actually pretty close with signing with a team in Saskatchewan with Nipawin, and kind of out of the blue, the coach Drew Shenick was his name in Powell River at the time called me, and I remember after that first phone call, my dad was like, "Oh, who was that?" And I said, "You know, it was Drew Shenick from Powell River," and he was like, "Where's that?" And I said, "I actually don't even think he mentioned what league it was." So then we got on, looked it up, however, BCHL, and that initial call, he hadn't offered a spot or anything, but like right away, I was like, okay, this is my only offer or opportunity out west, like in the BCHL. So whatever I got to do, I'll do that. I'd actually been playing in a spring tournament that weekend, so I said I wasn't able to talk until the weekend or the week after. And he called, and he had offered myself and a couple other SAS kids spots. Like, yeah, we still had to come to camp and whatnot, but we were starting the year on the team and whatnot. So I remember, having to sign the old player card and fax it back and kind of date myself a little bit there. But and then it was just like, okay, now got to do some research on the team, on the town, on everything. I never left home, never had to play anywhere where I had to commute further than like 20 minutes. So it was going to be a big adjustment, but my mind was made up pretty early that 17-year-old year that I wanted to get away, and thankfully that opportunity came up, and kind of the rest is history.
Well, it's a very, very good league to go play in. I've said this many times that when you talk about tier two junior leagues in Canada, like the BCHL was probably when we were growing up the top one. If you weren't going to the USHL in the States,
Yeah.
you were going to go to the BCHL. Like that's just how it was. And they were very professionally run, kind of prepared you for with the daily life, the daily schedule, practices, and all that, like prepared you for whatever your next was going to be, if it was going to be major junior or
Mm-hmm.
college. And you end up playing 3 years there. As you said, it was probably a little bit of an adjustment, living away from home, but I think it obviously prepared you for later down the road when you went to college, because it probably didn't seem like such a culture shock to you. And your last year there in Powell River, you get to play with your brother, which I'm sure
Yeah.
was nice as well. But I was curious. So with your 3 years experience there, like obviously, every year you were consistently putting up more points. How was the school interest like coming in? Like, were you going on lots of visits, stuff like that? Like, take us through like how kind of the process went for you, and then evidently you end up picking Union.
Mm-hmm. So the first year was like nothing outside of kind of generic interest. Like I talked to a couple teams, but more so just like introductory talks, and they would send their package kind of about the school and about the facility and all like that. But I think that first year was more so an eye opener because, especially at the beginning of the year, you'd see how many schools were out at our games, and like our top guys were talking to like 4 or 5 schools after every game type thing. And that was like, okay, so this is like the real deal. Like we're being watched all the time. And then on top of that, my first year in the league was like Turris was in the league, Bozak was in the league, the Ben brothers were in the league. Like there were guys who not only were already committed to go play D1, but these guys were also being watched nightly by NHL scouts. Like I think when we played Burnaby that year, I believe like Wayne Gretzky saw 2 of our games because he was involved with the Coyotes then, and they obviously took Turris. So that was the first time I was exposed to that. And then my second year obviously was like a better year personally for myself, and the team was a lot better as well. And I started getting some more interest, and I talked to Quinnipiac and Bowling Green and RIT, and um, no visits that year, but I had a couple offers, and a big part of me was wanting to play that 20-year-old year, knowing that Matt was going to be coming out. We'd never played together before, and that was potentially going to be our only chance to play together. So I, you know, some of the schools wanted me to commit my 19-year-old year and then still play my 20-year-old year, but come in my 21 And my belief on the time was, if I jump at something here, if it's not 100% the right fit, I might miss out on something my 20-year-old year, because who knows what could happen. And so I said no to a couple schools that year. And then my 20-year-old year came around, and obviously our team was really good. We had a lot of guys commit that year. We had some good young players come in, made the league final. And kind of how Union came about was the year before I got to Powell River, the captain of Powell River, Mike Wakita, he committed to Union. Then my first year, our leading scorer, Adam Przysniak, he committed to Union. And then my second year, Kelly Zajac, who I grew up together, played midget with, he was also in the league. He committed there. So I started getting pretty familiar with Union, even though I hadn't talked to them. And then they started talking to me pretty early, my 20-year-old year. And it was just one of those things where kind of right away, it was like the conversations had like a little bit of a different feel than some of the talks I'd had with other schools. It definitely felt more personable. And then when I went on my visit there, small campus, I'd known some guys already, and got a taste of what their daily life was like, and kind of just once I stepped foot on campus, I kind of made up my mind. It's like, okay, if an offer comes, like, I'm probably going to choose this. So the offer came, and originally they had kind of given me a little bit of a deadline. And when I was in the office, I had to say, oh, like, I actually have another visit that I have to go on next weekend. So they were fortunate enough to grant me that time. But at that time, I knew I was going to go there. But the funny thing about that was, in admissions, they had made a mistake on my parents' income. So when the first read came back, it was like substantially higher than what we were going to be able to afford. And I remember just being crushed. And I had to tell the coaching staff, I was like, you know what? I can't ask my parents to pay that. They probably would have, but in my head, I was like, that's just way too much. And they understood. And then I think not even 24 hours later, I got a call back from Nate, and he's like, no, admissions made a mistake. They added an extra zero to one of your parents' incomes. It brought it substantially down. And I remember just being like so elated that it was going to work out and whatnot. So that's kind of how that went in terms of choosing Union and getting that commitment, and kind of trusting and betting on myself, because it definitely did feel a lot different and a lot more right than some of those conversations I had my 19-year-old year and the beginning of my 20-year-old year. So things definitely worked out that way. Yeah.
Well, it's such a huge decision. And like you brought up like a lot of good points about, that 19-year-old year, like you're getting these offers and, you could break your leg the next year and be out, a long time. Right. Like, and that's just how the risk of the sport.
Yeah.
And, but you trusted your gut, which I think is huge and obviously shows, you believing in yourself. And, evidently you end up finding like a place that you felt very comfortable with and kind of stood out to you
Mm-hmm.
more and felt more like natural than maybe some of the other schools. um One thing I just was looking at your Powell River roster. I saw you played with Carson Schuback. um
Yeah.
so he obviously came to Niagara with me after, and I remember when we played you guys, he got the start the one game against you guys, and then I came in for the second half. But yeah, that kid, my second year, his freshman year, he came in and just was on fire until he got injured.
Yeah.
So really,
Well,
really
he was
athletic
on
guy.
fire for us. He was on fire for us our 20-year-old year. We acquired him, and kind of same thing. Like, he was, yeah, we had a lot of firepower on that team, but he was definitely a driving force for us. So no, it wasn't a surprise to any of us that he went to D1, ended up going D1.
Mm-hmm. He's a very athletic goalie, and very hardworking guy. Like he'd be
Mm-hmm.
on skating by himself every morning before practice,
Yeah.
making me look like a lazy guy. So, but
Yeah.
back to you. So you end up going to Union, as we talked about, make that decision. And I mean, like this school, like it's funny, like I joke, like how many guests I've had on, but they all just kind of reminisce about their 4 years. Obviously, you guys had some very good teams. You had two different coaches, Nate Lehman, who
Mhm.
obviously I think was there for your first 2 years or
Two, yeah.
yeah, and then Rick Bennett took over, and I just felt like, as you said, smaller campus, like great fan support. But the thing I noticed about when I talk to anyone about who went there is they just had such a great experience because you guys were like, it's cheesy to say, but like band of brothers. Like everybody got along with everybody. Like you all wanted to be together, do stuff together. Like it just seemed like the camaraderie was just like unbreakable. And I've said it before that I'm sure at other schools there's other examples of this, but it just seems like at Union it was something different.
Yeah, and obviously it's kind of like beating a dead horse with some of the guys you've had on and the stories that they've said, but it's kind of like I got that feeling even on my visit when I wasn't on the team, that it's like, okay, like they're already embracing me and I'm just a junior player from trying to crack it type thing. And then your first day on campus when you first get there and it's just the hockey team and I think like the football teams there and whatnot, but they're already training and about to start playing and we're like right away, like it's one of those things where you just like, especially your classmates, like you see the guys in your class like all day every day, and then outside of that, whether it's you're a freshman you see a senior or it's your sophomore year, whatever it is, like everyone gets along and it's not uncommon to see different ages like mixing from day one. Like as soon as a freshman gets there, like it's not uncommon to see them with the seniors, for a month. And I think it on top of that, it was like we knew that at least my class, we knew like the program was on the up when we got there. And then it was just like every recruiting class after they were bringing in like-minded people and they did a really good job of like recruiting high character guys, like no one who was going to be an issue in the dressing room or be an issue at the dorm or anything like that. And when you have guys that want to be around each other like all the time, it just nothing but good things happen once you get inside the locker room and get on the ice. So um it's definitely like hard for me to pick out one team of the four that were the tightest because I talked to guys from every class that I played with there still. So like you said, I'm sure other schools have that, but I think being such a small school like we are and kind of having like an us against the world mentality, not being able to give out scholarships and whatnot, like it was just the perfect combination, perfect recipe for success with who they brought in and how they went about building the teams. And yeah, four of the best years of my life for sure.
And how was the adjustment for you, like in terms of hockey wise, like, because obviously, as you said, like you guys are really tight. And I think you're one of those schools that didn't like, you know, as I said, we were coming in that time still. We're not like, I don't want to say hazing, but it was like, the seniors to a freshman. It's like, you got to learn your place, like learn it's not your
Mhm.
time yet, blah, blah, blah. But at Union, I don't think there was anything like that to that extreme. And I'm just curious, like for the hockey side of it, like did you feel it was a big adjustment coming from BCHL to junior, or did you feel like it was a smooth transition?
Like obviously the biggest thing was like, a lot of schools, especially in the ECAC older conference. So a lot of schools had like 24, 25-year olds as seniors on the team. So that was probably a big adjustment seeing like actual men every night. Um, but in terms of my game and in terms of my transition, like I think the BCHL did a really good job getting me ready for that, and Powell River especially. Like we travel to every game and spend the night after every away game, and we're away from our home quite a bit, so you're forced to mature. And then getting to Union, it was like, okay, didn't matter if it was Monday practice, Friday game, pregame skate on Saturday. It didn't matter what it was. It was like as soon as you put your helmet on, it was go to work. And that mentality was just kind of the standard from day one. Everyone who steps foot in that locker room knew that. So I think that helps with the transition for any player. But yeah, I remember my opening weekend against Maine. It was kind of like standing on the goal line waiting for the starters to be called, and kind of having a little bit of a wow, like this was a goal that I've been working for a long time, and like here I am. Like I definitely had a moment like that. And then once the puck dropped, it was kind of like, it's a game that we grew up from a young age playing, and it's still the same game. It's just the only thing different. And I'm sure you can relate to what the college game is just like, okay, it's full tilt every night. And that was a little bit of a like, man, why is no one slowing the play down? Why is no one, you know what I mean? So parts of it definitely took a bit of time to adjust to, but other parts, I think the BCHL did a really good job prepping me for.
I always joke with people who haven't gone that route or are curious and going, one, you're going to learn how to work out because you work out a shit ton
Yeah,
in college. And two, you're going to be the most fearless person out there because you got a cage or a fishbowl on. And so it's just,
yeah,
it's as you said, it's full tilt. Guys finish every check. Like
yeah.
it's, you know, and, I think leading up to the week too, like you do a lot of battling stuff in practice. So once you get to
Oh
those
yeah,
Saturday games, it's time to unleash all that testosterone. So,
yeah, for sure. That's a good way of putting it.
um, and I want to, so just to touch on it a little more, obviously coincidentally, I'll say, or, lucky for Union, your brother ends up joining, I believe 2 years after you. So I believe he came in your junior year. Did you have
Sophomore.
obviously sophomore year? So he came 1 year after.
He came 1 year after. Yeah,
Okay, right. I'm always mixing up the
yeah.
years. But anyway, so he clearly would have, I'm sure at some point came and visited when you were there. And, you know, did you basically just have a big influence in, recruiting him there? Like, did he want to play with his brother again and saw the program like you saw it, like up on the rise? And you obviously were sharing stories of, all the good times you were having.
He actually, when he visited, I was committed to Union, but it would have been like the spring, the year prior to me going in. So like I went in the fall. That spring is when he visited, so I hadn't been there yet. Um, but he was like a highly recruited player. You'd have to ask him. I don't even know how many offers he had. Um, and it was one of those things where he definitely asked me what it was like once I was there, but I tried as best I could to leave that decision to his. Like I didn't want to have too big of an influence on it. But I remember a few conversations with the staff at Union, like, what do we got to do to get him? Because he kind of they offered him pretty early, and I think he made him wait. And um, but for myself, I definitely like selfishly wanted him to come. Like we had a lot of success together. The only year that we played together, and it was just one of those things where you don't get that opportunity all the time to play with your brother. So I definitely wanted him to come out. Knew he was a good player. Knew he was going to transition well to whatever school he went to. And thankfully for myself and for Union, he ended up choosing Union. So we had a great 3 years together, and I know my parents really liked that as well. So it was nice for them.
Save them maybe an extra trip to another school. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but and then like so we talked about the school kind of like up and coming, and I think it really, you would know more than me, but just looking at the years that you yourself was there, obviously like Juris and all of them as well. Like your junior, senior year, I feel like you guys really like started at the peak. Like you were winning your division. I think you won both years in a row. Your last years, you won your division's championship. And evidently, I think the year after you left, or maybe 2 years after you left, that's when they won the national championship. So they really
Yeah.
had been going up the peak there. Um, One thing that I think we've talked about, the team had a lot to do with it, but also the coaching staff. I've brought this up many times, and I need to hear your stories on it. The famous Union spring workouts. Um, I've asked Troy about them. I've asked Juice about them. I've asked Carzy about them. So everyone shared their stories on it. But
Yeah.
you know, again, for those who have no idea about these, they might not fly today, but they definitely, you know, allowed guys to persevere through a lot of mental challenges. I'll say both physical and mental. But what's your recollection of these workouts, and do you have any funny stories about them to share?
I mean, I think it was I think it was Jur who said like you've never been so close to quitting before. And I think if you ask like the majority of guys, at some point there was probably a time during one of those workouts where they're like, what are we doing here? Is this worth it? And it's funny you have that moment, but then as soon as it's over, it's nothing but like one, you're gassed, but two, now that workout is used as like I kind of want to say it almost like in a joking fashion, but it's like if we can do that, like why can't we do a 2.5 hour practice? Or if we can do that, why can't we do a 6 a.m. lift or whatever it was? But those guys have touched on a few. The one for like myself personally, I remember it would have been the spring of my sophomore year. I think spring of sophomore year. And the team was broken up into however many groups, and myself, my brother, and one of the other guys who's like a lighter guy. And so when I say lighter, like I think in college I was playing around 170 pounds, 165. My brother was even lighter. And so one of the stations that we had was it was a sled push station, but it was outside on the concrete, and it was in this certain part of our parking lot that had like a slight incline. And they put on, I don't even know how much it was, but it was like more than double my weight, which on a normal surface probably would have just been fine. Like you push it, you do your whatever. And on on this one, I just remember there was I think six of us in the group, and two of them were like the two of the bigger guys on the team. They had no problem. Well, I shouldn't say no problem, but they could get it up the hill, blah blah blah. Like myself, my brother, and this other guy, we were just it was like a cartoon, man. We were spinning tires, like we couldn't get this thing moving, nothing. Coaches are just kind of standing there watching, don't say anything. Finally, you get a couple guys help you get it up there. And it's like in my head, I remember thinking like they have to know there's no way that we can get this thing pushed uphill at that weight based on what our weight is, just like kind of basic physics. And that was one that I always remember thinking to myself, like, what was the point? Just like a mental thing. And it was a mental thing. I think all the workouts were mental things because that was definitely something that was preached was like the mental toughness. And I think they all built that. But so that was one I remember. Two, I can't remember who touched on it, but these pool workouts I thought were wild because we had some very, very bad swimmers on our team, like very bad swimmers. And we were just like, you get there, show up, okay, hop in. So you hop in, and first thing was like tread water. So even for guys who like can swim but don't swim all the time, you can only tread water for so long. So now you add in the guys who are brutal swimmers, and they're like struggling right off the bat. And it's not because they're out of shape or anything. It's just because they're like they can't swim. And then next thing you know, like 2 minutes in, here's like a 15, 20 pound weight. Now while you're treading water, you guys got to pass it around. And when you have 27 guys in a circle in a pool, it takes a long time for that thing to get from you all the way back around. And I remember a couple times being like, it would get to a certain player and they'd get it like this. The next thing you know, you'd see their like head go down and they'd just like pass it like this and then like pull themselves up. And you couldn't help but like one, be like, oh my God, like we're gonna have to save this guy. And then two, you can't like once you see that he's okay, you can't help but laugh. And then you think that fuels into I don't want to say like the anger, but like fuels into the coaching staff being like, okay, I guess we got to push these guys harder. And then the next thing I remember we got out and it was like you had to do a lap of the pool. And I think the first one started with the weight. So you had to swim the length of the pool with the weight. And same thing, like like you got guys who can barely make it like halfway. and they're starting to crash. And so it was just like things like that. And obviously none of us were ever in like real danger and like that. And none of us ever thought that anything was being done that crossed the line. But now when I look back at it, like it's definitely something that we all laugh about, we all joke about, and it's definitely something that played big into the culture and the character of the way that we played. Because if you looked at the way we played, um, like we didn't get bullied around the rink ever, and usually we were on the flip side. So I think whatever the goal was from the staff, I think they did a pretty good job getting it into us.
I've said to all the union guys, I don't think it, and like it obviously was a physical battle, but I really believe these workouts had nothing to do with physical. It was more mental and like how far can we push them, and if they can get through this, then everything else will seem easier to them. Like, you know, a 2 minute shift on the ice or
Yeah,
whatever it
for
is, right?
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I also do believe that most hockey players, you know, every team, I'd say they have some guys who have a lot more muscle, excuse me, than other guys, and muscle is a lot heavier. So those guys would have been just already had weights on them, so they'd just be sinking to the bottom. But
Oh, it was like, yeah, it was pretty comical. Like I wish someone videotaped that because watching just the average person swim in general, it's like, oh, like it's not a very athletic person. When you take guys who are like in peak shape and then you put them in a pool, you see how hard swimming is. And then you add in all of these exercises that literally they're doing in like the Marines or in like the SEALs. It's like it gives you an appreciation for that, but at the same time, you're like, man, I'm a hockey player. Like, what am I doing here?
it reminds me of whatever the movie is. It's Kevin Costner and Ashton Kutcher, and they're like, he's like a lifeguard, and he goes through life guard
Oh yeah,
training.
yeah,
And like it just reminded me of that because there's like one guy who comes in, he's completely jacked and he thinks he's the shit, and he goes in the pool and they tell him to tread and he sinks to the bottom because he's just so like
yeah,
so heavy, and like
yeah.
that's what I was thinking of. But two other things I want to talk about Union before we move on. Obviously, you know, one which I think is easier to just to quickly bang out is what did you end up graduating from there? So what did you end up graduating with?
Economics. I ended up taking economics with a minor in history.
Not a bad degree to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Clearly using it
See,
now,
you know
eh?
what? It seemed like when I first came in, a lot of the guys were doing economics, but we also had a lot of guys doing engineering, and there was no chance I was doing engineering. So I
Yeah.
just kind of went the other way, and I had an interest in it, but yeah, it was yeah.
He'll kill me for saying this, but I'm curious to see when Juice has was it his psychology degree? I'm excited for him to use that one day.
Exactly.
But no, that's good. Obviously, economics is a good one to have. And then I forgot to ask this earlier on when we were talking, but we just got carried away with the stories here. But did you feel going to college at 21 like helped you, or at least in your case was maybe better for you in terms of like adjustment and just adapting to everything instead of, you know, say going at 18, 19 years old?
Yeah, definitely. Like and everyone's different, but especially for myself. And I remember like I mentioned with the ECAC being kind of like a bigger, older conference, there were some younger guys, but like there weren't really any true freshmen. There was like the odd true freshman. Um, and I think just, you know, for myself and for my own confidence, my own game, like the transition from my 19-year-old year to my 20-year-old year in junior went a long way. And then it just made me come in like that much more confident in my own game. And then I remember thinking back too, and would have been around that time. Like the difference between a 21 and a 24-year-old is a lot different than like a 16 or 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. Like if I'm looking back to the major junior, thinking about like what my camps were like. And I remember asking guys too who had gone to college a little earlier than I did. And a lot of them would always say, like, oh, I wish I stayed and played out my junior. And whether that's for development or whether they just like the junior lifestyle or whatever it was, I was pretty glad that I was able to find a spot in Union who wanted to take me as a 21-year-old. One, but two, then I was able to get, my full 3 years out of junior and then my 4 years out of college.
I think when we were growing up, and this is just my opinion, like I could be wrong on it, but I felt like there was a hidden pressure or a hidden um philosophy, I would say, that you'd be better to take a scholarship at 18, 19 years old because the colleges aren't going to be looking for those guys at 20, 21, because the always this the statistics thing will say, and it's the same with major junior. When a 16-year-old is playing against a 20-year-old, or whether it's tier junior or the OHL, WHL, whatever, like statistically, he should have more points than that guy because there's a 4-year gap, and he's now playing against the younger guys. And I felt like with the college route, people would tell you like, oh yeah, because you're playing against younger kids, they're not going to look at you anymore because you should be putting up points, blah blah blah, which was totally far from the truth, clearly. And
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys. I wish I'd played one more year because we had such a really good team the next year that in my freshman year in college. Like the team in junior I played for was really good, so it would have been
Yeah.
beneficial for me to stay. But I tell people, like, there's no rush. Like if you go to college at 19, if you go to college at 21, like if you graduate at 23 versus 25, like it's 2 years. Like it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And I notice it now, like coaching, like a lot of these kids, it's almost like they just want to get to the next level, like as soon as they can. And that I where that comes from, I'm not sure where that pressure comes from, but what I try to tell them is kind of conquer the level you're at before you go to the next one. And some guys will leave junior early and they go on and have a great college career, and clearly they were ready to make that step. And some guys make the step a little too early and they end up back in junior. And I try my best to kind of, like, everyone at that next level is doing everything that you're doing plus some. So you gotta realize that what we're preaching here is what they're preaching at the next level, and we're just trying to prepare you guys. And a lot of them, if they come in as a 17-year-old and they don't have that scholarship like when they're 18, it's like my junior career is over. Whereas I'm saying, you like, hey, you were in the league at 17. There's not a lot of 17-year-olds in the league. Plus, you still have the potential to play your 18, 19, 20-year-old year here. Like, there's no rush to secure that because, your 19-year-old year versus your 17-year-old year should be drastically different. So, I definitely agree with you. Like that hidden pressure for whatever reason and wherever it comes from. But as you've seen now, like more and more pro teams are taking college free agents, and um, they don't care that it's an older. They probably actually prefer that it's a little bit older because those players are having those extra years to develop before they go to pro. So um, if I had my way, they would all stay and play all 3 years here and then go and play their college. But obviously, everyone's different and every path is different. So. Mm-hmm.
we'll definitely cover this a little more once we transition to your coaching side of it. I want to stick with your playing
Yeah.
side for now, but obviously, as you said, I do agree that um for whatever reason, for some guys, it depends on the person. Some people can make
Yeah.
that jump to college at 18 as a
Yeah.
true freshman. Some guys have to go 21. Like there's no
Yeah.
direct way. But so back to you after you end up graduating there from Union, um, you do what I like to call the ECHL grind.
Oh yeah.
And that first year pro for you, you end up playing on 4 teams there, which isn't uncommon in the East Coast because it's, if you're not a drafted guy, not a signed guy, it's hard to make it. There's only a certain amount of spots, and a lot of teams have guys coming down on AHL deals to play games, whatever it is. But how would you describe that first year pro for you in the ECHL and doing that grind?
uh, the biggest eye opener, you just kind of touched on it, was like actually finally being exposed to the business side. of the game and realizing like it is a business. Like I was never traded as a in junior. And then I obviously went and played 4 years at the same school. So I had never gone through that. And I remember I went to Rockford, went to their camp and had a good camp and was basically just told straight up, like, it's a numbers thing. Down to the coast you go, uh, which was, expected. Went to the coast, and in Cincinnati, we were double affiliated. And yeah, you're aware of it, but you're not aware of how many guys are like on NHL contracts, for example, that are playing in the American League or the East Coast League, until you're there playing. So that was probably the biggest adjustment. And then, like you said, kind of bouncing around, playing on different teams, and one of the teams folded. Two of the teams, same thing. I think, like, I can't even remember how many guys Cincinnati had on contract, and it was just one of those things where I think it was like a really good learning experience to be exposed to that. And then at the same time, like, I realized I could play at the pro level, and it was always like a childhood goal of mine to play pro hockey. So yeah, it was definitely a unique year to say the least.
Forgot about that. I forgot the San Francisco folder, right? The
Yeah,
Bulls. Yeah,
yeah,
I forgot about that. Love to see it.
yeah.
No, but
Welcome to the coast.
yeah, as you said though, it was good that you like found the positive in that because it is hard. Like, you're, as you said, you're changing teams 4 times. Always packing your suitcase. Like
Yeah,
it's a league where you come in every day being like, I hope my bag's not packed, or I hope I
yeah,
don't get caught in the coach's office. Like it's such a different experience, but it's good that you still found the positive that you were able to put up points, which you did. Um, your first year pro, even though with the circus going on, behind the scenes. But after that year, I'm curious, like, did you right away think, okay, like I'm done with this with North America? Like, I did it once and I want to go to Europe, or was it still kind of like, you were looking for something, if you could find something a little more permanent in the coast, you might stick it out for another year and try again?
I kind of went back and forth, to be honest. Like, so the spring of my senior year, I actually had an offer to go to Europe. So instead of going to the coast my first year, I could have just went to Europe right away. And, like, I think the only reason I stayed was because I wanted to play pro hockey in North America. And then after that first year bouncing around, I was like, like, I wonder how different things would be had I have taken that original offer. And same thing, like, I ended up getting in the off season. I got traded from Toledo to Reading, and like, I got traded, and I was like, okay, I'll go to Reading. Like, that's fine. I knew a couple guys who had gone there and said good things about it and whatnot. So, but at the same time, I did have a couple offers in the summer to go to Europe, but I don't know what was the tipping point. I ended up, staying, went to Reading, numbers thing again. And then as soon as I kind of started seeing that, like, more guys starting to come back to Reading, I was like, okay, I know it's late now. I'm gonna have to wait, but I want to get overseas. So then that's when I started kind of really trying to explore how to get over there. And um, in hindsight, I don't want to say I wish I did, but I probably should have definitely considered going to Europe earlier, probably more seriously. And but at the same time, I don't necessarily regret not doing it.
The big decision, I said it before, like some people, like when they're not familiar with something, like they're kind of hesitant because you hear like these stories sometimes about in Europe, like the horror stories of, yeah, we didn't have this, or this happened, so they get nervous because they're more familiar with the North American side. Then obviously, most European countries speak a different language, so it's an adjustment. But yeah, that year, I think in November, maybe after November break or December, you end up coming to Morzine, and that's where we got reacquainted.
Yeah,
Before playing against each other, now finally teammates. So
yeah,
we talked about it off camera. Like we had a lot of fun times there. I felt like it was a great a great, like the Magnus at that time was an up and coming league. Like they've
Yeah,
progressed now, and it was a great starting league for guys like us, who were fresh out of college. And um, the one game a week thing was kind of funny and stuff. But
yeah,
I have to say, like the so me, you, Andrew Perot, and Dan Radke there, like we kind of just created this like group together where we
yeah,
were doing stuff together every day. And I was always a kind of a guy that was, I'll go chill in my room, I'll go watch Netflix on my computer, or I'll play games. And I remember like we would always like playing schnarps or whatever.
yeah,
Like it was a really cool town to kind of do things together. And obviously in the winter, like you came at the perfect time. You had the skiing
yeah.
and everything. So just talk about your experience from how you saw it there in Morzine.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was interesting. I remember flying to Geneva and getting. I didn't even get picked up. I think they sent like a. It was like essentially an. It was like a shared Uber essentially. I think there was like five of us. I got in. I was obviously coming for the hockey team. I think everyone else was just like tourists who had booked this ride. And I remember getting dropped off at the apartment that was actually outside of Morzine, and they just like dropped me off. I didn't have a key, didn't have like anything. Go to the apartment, locked, can't get in. Then I remember I had to walk like a few blocks to this pub because it was the only place that was open, so I could call like the manager who had completely forgot that I was coming in that day. So like it was a bit of a funny start, and then I just remember, yeah. So I got there. It was still the off season. When I say off season, I mean for like skiing. When I got there, and I remember how like different it felt then because it was just like pretty much strictly French, as you know. And but it was good that you guys were there because I'd known you, I'd met you a little bit, and then obviously having two other Canadians on the team helped. And um, I had a lot of fun there. It was definitely noticeable when we played some of those other teams that we were like a little bit of a lower budget team and whatnot. But like you said, the league was definitely up and coming, and I recognized some names who were already over there, and some guys that I played against the coast the year before who were really good players who had American League experience and whatnot, um, had chosen to go play there. So it was definitely a league that was up and coming, and I didn't really know what to expect. That was the biggest thing. I didn't really know what to expect out of that league because it's not a league that you really ever heard of, and but it was probably a better league than I thought going there.
I think that's very well said because I think a lot of people, when you think of France, you think of football or soccer,
Yeah.
as we say, just true. But the league, there are a lot of good hockey players there and guys who play in the national team. And funny you mention it, we actually play on Wednesday. We play Rouen in the Champions League, so
Oh yeah.
one of the higher teams there. So
Yeah.
that would have been a team that every time you go there, if you lose 7-1, that was a win for us. And
Yeah.
there was, I would say, and I think it's still true now, the gap between the teams just because of money and stuff is, pretty big. Like the top teams like the Rouen, the Grenobes, Angers now they have a brand new rink. So like they have a good amount of money, paying guys good salaries where
Yeah.
we were, the teams imports that we were taking on our teams was guys fresh out of college or who just
Yeah.
wanted to get over and would come cheap. And, you
Yeah.
know, good chances for us. And as I said, we had a lot of fun there. Um, and it's a great place to live in the Alps, everything like
Yeah.
that.
Beautiful town. It's definitely a spot I'd like to get back to and see in a different light, like not being a hockey player there. I think yeah, that was an awesome spot.
Unfortunately, I think Mama's shut down the burger
Oh
place.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not there anymore. That's a rumor I heard. But after that season, you end up going to Germany, which ended up being your last year of playing professionally. Um, how did you like that experience playing in Erfurt there in the Oberliga? And then the next question I wanted to ask, like after that season, what ended up kind of making you decide, yeah, okay, it's time to retire, time to move on and go into the real world.
After that year in France, I actually had a couple offers to go back to that league from other teams. And I kind of had I kind of had my eyes set on maybe trying to go to either like Scandinavia or into Germany if I could, or just try something new. And I ended up going to Erfurt, and I you know what, the city's beautiful. The guys were great. I don't have any regrets going there, but a big part of why I left was apparently like, or some of those horror stories that you hear about, not necessarily anything horrific, but some stuff that I thought was agreed upon in the contract wasn't coming to light as things were progressing. And I was playing pretty well and whatnot for them. And when I left, the plan wasn't for me to necessarily like stop playing. When I came back, I could have signed back in the coast. Like I had two offers, like pretty much right when I got back, and I did have an offer in the third league in Sweden, if I wanted to go there. But at the time, I was like, okay, I'll go back because it was right around Christmas. I'll go back and I'll kind of weigh my options. And while I was back, like Powell River asked me if I wanted to just come out, whether I wanted to skate or help or anything. So I was, and it was kind of a bit of both. And then the coach at the time kind of put the bug in my ear, like, would you want to come on board and help coach the rest of the season? And I hadn't really thought about it. And after that, I was like, okay, do I want to go to a new spot right now? And if it's in the coast, am I gonna bounce around again? Or do I want to go back over to Europe, give another go? And it just felt comfortable kind of looking at the game in a different light from the coaching aspect. I was pretty fresh out where I was able to have a lot of fun with the guys and relate to them on a much different level than the existing staff. So it worked out. And even after that season, I still contemplated playing another year. And then just kind of with what we had going on, my wife had a good job. Um, got married that off season, stuff like that. Like it all made sense to stay and kind of start setting some roots here. So that's kind of how that all went. But no regrets in terms of playing or anything of that magnitude. It's unfortunate that my last experience kind of had some hiccups, but can't have it all.
Yeah, that's I mean, like that's kind of the things you go through, I would say, in Europe, especially
Yeah.
in those lower leagues. And not to say the Ober
Yeah.
League is a lower league, but it's the third one in Germany.
Third.
So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
just exactly what I'm trying to say. And you have teams like that, and they know that they can kind of lie to get guys over, and then they know worst
Yeah,
comes to worst, it'll be easy to fill your spot, and it'll be cheaper because you played half the season or whatever it was,
exactly.
and then now they can fill a guy. So unfortunately, that's the business side of it. Don't
Yeah.
agree with it, but you mentioned the transition, right? So you end up getting married, getting into real estate, and then you end up getting into coaching. You kind of get your feet wet the second half of that year before. And I'm curious, you know, your teaching philosophy. So as you said, you could kind of connect with the players there at the time because you were someone that had just freshly come out of the game. You'd been to college, you'd been to the pro route. Um, how was it for you, like being able to kind of share your experiences with these guys that you're coaching, and kind of guide them in terms of, this is what you need to do to get here. This is what I would recommend for the college route, blah, blah, blah. Here's how you get to pro. Like, how was that all for you?
It was it was good. It was a big reason why I was doing it. Like the main thing was obviously being able to stay involved in the game at a pretty high level. And then you start talking to these guys who are in the midst of going through like what I had gone through not that long ago. And I kind of felt like there's a void that I could fill because there were a lot of things that I was able to bring from whether it be pro or college specifically in terms of um kind of like day-to-day routines. Because to be perfectly honest, when I look back at what my day-to-day was like when I was a junior player, it's like, how did I do that? Like, brutal sleep habits, brutal eat habits, and it was just kind of like being a teenager. And then it's not as much as me wanting to like take that away. Like you want them to live and enjoy and all that, but it's more so it's like, okay, guys, you know, yeah, you're a point per game guy here and you're committed, but you're gonna go in to wherever you're going. Like we have guys go all over, obviously, and everyone in your class is the same as you in terms of they're producing at wherever they are, and everyone who's on that team, like they might not be producing right now, but where they came from, they were producers. They were leaned on in a different aspect. So it was definitely a way for me to say to the guys like, hey, you're really good at this. Like you're our leading scorer, for example. But if we can now make it so you are the first guy over the bench with a minute left and we're protecting a lead, like that's going to go longer for you next year as a freshman than you being a point per game guy or a point and a half per game guy as a junior A player, because there's 6, 7 forwards that your school already has who are in that spot. But if you can do something that they can't do, that's going to keep you in the lineup every night. And um, just being able to relate to that, because our coach at the time was older, done a very good job of getting players to the next level, but no kind of recent firsthand experience at that level. So it was definitely a unique way for me to be able to share that side of it.
I like to ask guys this too because I think it's crazy, just from my personal experience. But now that when you're on the other side of it and you're teaching these kids or talking to these kids about something, or like you're watching video, like, do you not think about yourself and being like, geez, like if I had known that, like, if I knew this, if I know all I know now back then, like, how
Oh,
much,
big time,
yeah, like it's,
big time. And like the instant analysis, right? Like when I was playing junior, we didn't have any video. Um, Now with our Instat and our Game Breaker and everything, you're able to go over this stuff with guys right away. And at Union, we did a lot of video, and the staff was really good at breaking down the game. It kind of positive and negative. And when I say negative, for the most part, it's all constructive stuff. But they're dealing with men, so that they're able to deal with it a little differently. But having that familiarity, and then now you see it, and like you said, I'm like, man, if I could go back and play junior, but know what I know or have learned along the way, like what would my career be like? It's easy to think that way, but at the same time, I also look at it the other side. I see some of the mistakes they're making. I'm like, yeah, those are the exact same mistakes I was making as a 19-year-old. Like I was making that every game. So it's kind of both sides there. So, but it's unique for sure.
I'm sure everyone looks back and it's easy to do that now, but that was one of the things I just really like noticed firsthand when I got into
Yeah.
coaching was like, oh man, like if only. But
Yeah.
we talked about this off camera. I think it's a good time to transition to it. Obviously, as we've said, you're coaching in the BCHL now. And I believe this is the first year the BCHL just kind of went independent. So before they were part of Hockey Canada with all those other tier two junior leagues. Um, Maybe you can just kind of explain, what that means for the BCHL and how the transition kind of has been so far to date.
So I think like the biggest thing is it's opened up how we're able to recruit. So big one is 16, 17-year-old Canadian kids from anywhere in the country can come play in our league now. Whereas under the Hockey Canada rules, they had to stay in their home branch unless they did. There were ways that you could do it. You could do an address change or have a different guardian in that province. But that's a big one. And then the other one is we're able to have non-North American, so like Euros. Each team can have two, and before we weren't allowed to have that. So we're pretty early into the season here, but there's definitely a noticeable jump in the depth in the league. And I think that's what the league was after. The league wants to be, they already were, but they want to get to that next level where it really is the league is doing everything they can to bring the best players here to prepare them for college. And, we have a handful of draft picks in the league right now, a handful of guys already on central scouting lists. And it's just one of those things where I think the changes that they made, hopefully, because we're all still adapting and learning, but I think hopefully will continue to progress this league to continue to be what it's known for, and that's propelling guys to the NCAA and pro.
Yeah, it's cool to see them kind of go out on their own there. And as you said, it's opened up a lot of new windows, a lot of new avenues for guys, which I think only can help grow the league, grow the game,
Yeah,
and add depth to it. Another thing I was curious about, just you being on the coaching side of it, and I know, like, for example, we've talked before about, is there any young Germans that could go over, blah, 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 stuff like that. But how is it for you? Like, are you communicating, I don't want to say like daily, but like, or weekly, are you talking to like NCAA schools about some guys or WHL teams about some guys? Like, how is that? Because obviously, you know, like in most junior leagues, guys wear a lot of hats. So you are coaching,
yeah,
but at the same time, I'm sure, scouts or, coaches from these schools or teams are contacting you being like, hey, what can you tell me about so and so?
yeah. It's definitely more communication with colleges. I'm in contact with a few schools pretty regularly, and then also it depends on if they have guys with us or if they have guys like even more so if their guys are in our conference because then we see them a bit more. They'll ask me like, oh, how's so and so look when you play them, or usually what I do at the start of every year is I just kind of touch base with as many of them as I can, kind of tell them a little bit about the guys that we have, ask them what they're looking for, that type of thing, and then kind of just work with them in terms of will any of our guys fit what they're after? Because my and our staff, like a big belief for us is first and foremost we're a developmental league. Our job is to get guys to the next level. Our job isn't to win the league every single year. And yeah, that's nice, and that's a part of hockey. Like we obviously realize that, but me personally, I'd rather see every guy on my team move on once they're eligible to move on versus have a revolving door type thing. So um, we're definitely doing everything we can to talk with as many schools as we can to advocate for our guys because myself, our head coach, or GM, like we all played college, so we're all pretty aware with what it takes to get to that next level. We're all still pretty connected in that world, so um, yeah, it's pretty constant. And for the younger guys, like I'm usually shocked. Like there's times where I'll ask those guys about a player that I think that they may have no idea who he is, and like they got a pretty detailed list about most players. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying about Instat. Like they have access to everyone and everything, and they're so detailed. So um, it's nice to be able to use it both ways in terms of promoting our players, but also using them to recruit players as well.
It's changed a lot since the days of us playing. That's
Big
that's
time,
that's for
big
sure.
time. Yeah,
Um, Couple more here, and then
yeah.
I'll let you go. It's your Sunday, so I'm sure you got other things to do. But
Canadian Thanksgiving, man.
Canadian Thanksgiving, totally forgot about that. Jeez, I'm an asshole. Um, have you ever? So we talked about like you're obviously, your full-time first job would be real estate, and then you're coaching, which a lot of Canadian parents do that. They have a job and then they devote a lot of their extra time to the game of hockey, which is great. But have you ever thought about the potential of, whether it's being a head coach in that league or even, maybe going back to your roots and going to a school to be an assistant coach like NCAA? Has that ever crossed your mind, or you're completely content with, you like what you're doing outside of hockey, you like what you're doing with the Powell River team, and then at the same time, your wife, family, everyone's comfortable with everything that they got going on?
Right now, like things are going pretty well with how my situation is with everything. Um, my wife and I have talked about it if the right opportunity came up. would we make that move? And I think it would be so kind of situation dependent that it's hard to make a judgment on that at this point. Would I like to be able to be a full-time coach? 100%. Like I find myself like doing hockey stuff all the time. And if the opportunity presented itself, I would definitely consider it, but it would have to make sense for my family, first and foremost. Um, but being involved in the game and in the league at this level, I feel it is keeping some doors open that if I do want to pursue that whenever it may be, that hopefully I'll have that chance. And yeah, so far and right now I'm pretty happy with where I'm at, but I'd be crazy to say that if an opportunity came up, I wouldn't consider it.
It's good to keep all options open, and it's good to hear that, families open to it too, because obviously you're at the stage where, wife, two kids, like it obviously has to be a group
Yeah.
decision. So, um, last two here for you. So when you look back at your career, both playing and now coaching, the coaching one obviously still going, did you think you would have had the career you've had when you look back, when you think about, starting out on the lake in the backyard or the backyard rink to where the hockey game took you?
Uh no, like to think that I would have started there, went through the road that I did, and then end up coaching with a team in a town, halfway across the country and being pretty settled here, pretty fortunate. There's no way I would have been able to say, yeah, this is what's going to happen. But the game was very good to me and opened up a lot of doors. And I'm trying to do everything I can to give back to the game. And um, I don't think I have any regrets with the choices I made or the path I took. So mhm.
It's good, man. Like people like yourself, man, giving back to the game. I think it's great. That's something we definitely you know, take for granted as kids, but now when you're on
Yeah.
when you're the parent or you're the one doing it, you kind of look back and go, okay, now I understand. So that's great.
Well, yeah, and
Um,
I'm not even involved with the minor hockey yet. Like once Remy gets going, who knows what's going to happen there?
well, man, you're gonna have to quit your part-time job of real estate agent and be a
Yeah,
full-time hockey guy.
yeah, exactly. Eh?
Um, and last one here, the one I always end on. Um, like to pick your brain, kind of get some advice here for the younger generation. But what's one piece of advice or multiple pieces of advices that you would give your younger self and the younger generation? So if you're speaking to Kyle Bodie at 16, 17 years old, like what is one or multiple pieces of advice you would give him and any younger kid listening?
That's a good question. I think a big one is, and it's easy for guys like us or older guys to say, but there's nothing better than being able to do hockey full time, whether that's coaching, playing pro. But I even consider that, when you're in minor hockey or when you're in junior and like that's all you do. Like there's nothing better than that. And if you're serious and love the game and whatnot, you only get that time for a short amount of time. And so really kind of do what you feel you need to do. And for every player that's different, but to prolong that for as long as you can, because once it's done, it's done. And you can stay involved in the game in other aspects, but once the playing time's done, like the playing time's done, as you know. So um that, and then the other thing too is and we touched on this, just as much as you can, just kind of slow down. Like there's no rush to get to the next level. There's no rush to get out of junior into college. And obviously opportunities are going to present themselves, and they, if they make sense, then yeah, you take them. But um I think a lot of players end up making decisions because maybe they feel like they won't have another option, or it's the first one that came along, and you know what, I'm going to satisfy that commitment. But slow down and enjoy the ride, and kind of trust yourself through the process. And I think nothing but good things can happen.
Uh, try not to get emotional right now after that speech there. Holy. Yeah, man. I mean, you said it best. I don't think I can really comment on it because you said it so perfectly well. But that was great advice. Things that I think we realize now, and that probably our parents, I know mine did, told me at younger ages, and I used to be like, yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, sure. And then now you
Yeah,
look back and go, oh man, I wish I had enjoyed that
yeah,
more. I wish I had enjoyed the ride because it's a great sport. It takes you many places. You get to meet so many people that you
yeah,
never probably would have had a chance out of the game to meet. And, as you said, you have many brothers and guys you still talk with from Union that if you didn't have the game of hockey, you never would have made those friendships, never would have made those bonds. So,
exactly.
um, yeah, I mean, I appreciate you doing this. I totally forgot it was Canadian Thanksgiving. So this is just one on me.
All good, all good. I
But no, I
appreciate having me
appreciate,
on.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing your story, man, because it's cool to hear. And now I'm really happy that you're gotten into coaching and you're kind of guiding these young athletes now to their own paths and kind of using your experiences to do so. So that's great. And I'll let you go enjoy your Thanksgiving, go enjoy some turkey, and I'm sure the family needs some help getting everything ready or what.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on, and I'll definitely be tuning in when you guys take on Ingolstadt and a couple of Union boys. So
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to them after and let them know
yeah, exactly.
their boy
Get
Bose
them
was
on.
on. But no, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for taking the time. And for those listening, until next week, cheers and ciao.